Now, the United Nations is seeking a record amount of aid for Afghanistan. It says the country needs more than $5 billion this year to avert a humanitarian catastrophe. It is the biggest ever call for donations for a single country. Well, our business editor Stephen Carroll is joining me here on set for more on that. Stephen, what exactly then is the UN actually looking for here?
The appeal is coming from the UN's Emergency Aid Coordinator, Martin Griffiths. He says the money is needed to stave off widespread hunger, disease, malnutrition, and even death in Afghanistan. The UN's looking for a total of more than $5 billion from international donors. That's more than 3 times the amount of assistance that it sought for the country in 2021. It breaks down to $4.4 billion for the humanitarian response. That'll go to 160 NGOs and UN agencies working in Afghanistan. Another 623 million being sought to support refugees from Afghanistan who fled to 5 neighbouring countries. It's estimated that around 2.5 million people have left the country, particularly going to Pakistan and to Iran. The UN says despite the size of this package, it's only a stopgap measure, and if it doesn't manage to raise this money this year, it's going to need double that amount, $10 billion, by next year.
So what sort of problems then is the money actually aiming to tackle?
So the money would go towards essentials: food, shelter, health services, water, sanitation, those sorts of things. Some of it will go directly to pay healthcare workers, the UN insisting that it won't fall into Taliban hands. But the scale of the crisis in Afghanistan is absolutely staggering. The country experienced 40 years of war and economic decline that came with that. Then, of course, the Taliban took over in August of last year. That saw essential international aid, which accounted for 40% of its economy, being cut off. On top of that, Afghanistan suffered its worst drought in decades in 2021, and that, of course, having a big effect on food production, which is adding to the overall issues around hunger. The UN says this year it expects more than 24 million people there will need humanitarian aid. More than half of the population is facing acute hunger, and that includes 9 million people who are considered one step away from famine, the highest number for any country in the world. The UN Development Programme estimates that 97% of Afghans could be in poverty by the middle of this year.
Wow, it does sound pretty catastrophic, doesn't it? I mean, what's the situation facing the broader economy, Steve?
So the economy essentially collapsed in August when the Taliban took over. The country's foreign currency reserves were frozen. That created a cash and liquidity crisis. Hundreds of thousands of workers who were working for the Afghan government lost their jobs or had stopped having their salaries being paid. The sanctions that was put that stopped that foreign aid have been somewhat eased since then. That's thanks to a UN Security Council resolution that was passed in December, which creates an exemption for humanitarian assistance and activities that support, quote, basic human needs. So that means that money that's being used to those ends can now enter the country where it had been blocked before. Nonetheless, the outlook being painted by the UN is very bleak for the future of the economy. GDP per capita in Afghanistan is expected to slump to $350 a head this year. That's down from more than $500 in 2020. The economy expected to contract by a fifth this year. The UNDP noting that the Taliban decision to restrict women from working is having a massive economic cost as well, slashing productivity and wiping another 5% of the country's GDP. This is, again, emergency aid the UN is looking for. It's not going to solve any of the fundamental economic problems in Afghanistan.
Stephen, thanks very much, Stephen Carroll from